Well, hello and welcome back to the Legal Gym podcast. This is a very two-part episode that I'm going to be posting here today. Next month marks 20 years since I first started my own business and first opened my own law firm. And over that time, I've lost more money than you can imagine on failed business ideas. I've bounced back. I've taken 2 bar exams and moved to different states. I've hired staff. I've lost staff. And I've learned more lessons about business and life than I can possibly count. So in this 2-part series, I want to share the top 20 lessons that I've learned in business over the last 2 decades. These are the hard-earned insights that shaped me as an entrepreneur, as a lawyer, and frankly, as a person. So even if you are not a lawyer, these tips are going to ring just as true for you as they did for me as I was starting and running my law firm. So today what we're going to do, basically, let me give you a little heads up. I've broken these 20 tips down into 4 or 5 different categories. We'll have 3 or 4 tips per category. And so today we're going to focus on mindset, money, and business relationships as the first 3 topics I want to talk about. Because if you don't get these 3 things right, these 3 categories right, the rest of your business is always going to feel like an uphill battle. So let's go ahead and get started today with the first 3 topics: mindset, money, and relationships. So the first topic I want to talk about is mindset and personal growth. If you don't have the right mindset to run a small business or be an entrepreneur, then chances are you're not going to be successful. Building a business is a long-term exercise. It's not one of those things where you're just going to start and get rich overnight. And there's a very good chance that as you're building your business, you're going to run into some tough times along the way. Cash flow might be short. You might have issues with your spouse or partner about the direction of the business. You may not have enough time in the day to get everything done. You may not have enough time in the day to spend good time with your family. And so there's a lot of issues that can come up as you're running a business, and that's why I'm including these mindset tips as some of the first and most important lessons that you need to be thinking about as you start on your entrepreneurial journey. So tip number 1 is that you really need to be aware that the only constant to entrepreneurship is change. What do I mean by that? The business that you start or that you are planning to start is rarely the business that you're going to be running in 5, 10, or even 20 years from now. Adaptability here is the key to survival. And when I first started my law firm and ventured out on my own, I remember it like it was yesterday. It was so exciting. And I started as a criminal defense lawyer, and that lasted about roughly 3 clients. I don't even know if I had 3 clients, maybe 2. And it was only a few months because I just never felt comfortable with that work and in that role, even though I'd been a public defender before I opened my law firm. And then the attorney that I was renting space from at the time started sending me what he used to call domestic work, which is a fancy way to say that he had divorce cases that he didn't want. And so I really started to find a niche in family law and managed to build a nice little practice handling divorce work. And I even wrote a couple books on the topic during the time. And I should have included this as a tip. I don't think I included this as one of the 20 tips, but if you can write a book about what you're doing and the business that you're running and become a thought leader in your space in that regard, that's a really smart idea. So that kind of bonus tip there. But anyway, after several years, I began getting burned out from family law. And it turned out that divorce brings out the worst in people. And all that negative energy was transferred to me as their lawyer. So I dabbled in some other practice areas, and I finally started working with business clients about 8 years ago. And that's when I really developed a niche for handling trademark work and working with entrepreneurs in the online space. And so, like I said, when I first started my practice 20 years ago as a criminal defense lawyer, I didn't think I was going to be doing trademarks, and I never even took trademark law in law school. So that's one thing you just need to be aware, that the business that you start is frequently not the business that you're going to end up with. I have another friend, just to illustrate this point even further, who his family started a business selling golf carts years ago. And I got together with him this summer and some other friends for a guys' weekend. And we were all talking about our businesses. We're all entrepreneurs. We all run our own businesses. And I was asking him how, golf cart sales were going. He's like, oh, well, we don't do that anymore. In fact, they don't do that at all. Now they sell, I like to call them, I'm not sure this is the correct term, and it's definitely not a term they can use because it's probably trademarked, but I like to call them rooms for golf courses. They basically sell what would the word be? robotic vehicles that can basically go out on autopilot, and using GPS coordinates and things like that, they can mow a golf course any way you want it to be mowed. And so that's what they sell now. They don't sell golf carts at all. And so just to go back, the only constant over the long run is going to be change. You can expect that your business is going to change over time and over the years, and that's going to happen. So that's tip number one. Tip number two, and again, we're talking about mindset issues here and personal growth. Tip number two is going to be to learn to say no. I want you to be aware that not every client, not every project, not every opportunity that comes your way is the right fit for you. I've been approached over the years with lots of people, other attorneys, other law firms who have wanted to partner with me, who have wanted to bring me on as an associate, who have wanted to do all sorts of different things. And I've said no to the vast majority of them. I think one time I started negotiating with a law firm that wanted to bring me on as to manage their firm. And once we get into the engagement agreement they wanted me to sign, and employment contract, I guess I should say, I just felt like I was giving up way too much from my law firm and not getting nearly enough from this other firm that wanted me to come on and join them. And so I said no to that. So just remember that not every project, opportunity, or client is going to be a good fit for you. But when you get started in business, here's what's going to happen. You just need to be aware of this. The thought of telling someone that you can't or won't work with them is extremely scary. It's especially true if they're ready to pay you a lot of money. So you've got somebody who wants to pay you money to do something, but you really don't feel comfortable doing it. What do you do? I want you to trust me when I say this. Tackling projects that you aren't passionate about, or that you don't believe in, or that you don't have the competency to handle, just because somebody's willing to pay you a lot of money, can quickly turn into more trouble than they're worth. And this has happened to me. I've gotten in these situations before. So you must trust that projects you do enjoy working on are going to fill that void left by the projects that you say no to. Saying no creates that space for the work and people that truly matter in your life. So just protect your time, protect your efforts, and learn to say no if it's a project that you just really don't feel comfortable with. The third tip I want to share with you is to always keep learning. I make it a habit to read or listen to at least one business, marketing, or sales book every month. I have had a subscription to Audible for years now, and I try and read at least or listen to at least one book per month. I've read a ton of books as a result, and if I find a book that I really like, what I'll do is I'll also purchase the physical copy of that book to mark up with a highlighter after the fact. So my bookshelf is filled with amazing books that I still refer back to and recommend to others, and it's great to use in conversation starters and things like that as well. Continuous learning keeps your ideas fresh and keeps your edge sharp. So I'm going to actually share my top 20 business books in a future post or on a future podcast. But in the meantime, here are 5 of my favorite books for you to check out. And these are all books that I read very early on in my entrepreneurial journey. The first one is by Bob Burg. He's written a number of books. He's a great author. I've actually had him on my other podcast that I did years ago, and it's called Endless Referrals. He gives you a strategy and tips for how to cultivate relationships with other people and turn those relationships into referrals for your business. The second one is Never Eat Alone, or develop a relationship that you can then get new business from. The third one was referred to me, and I read it, and I refer back to it all the time. It's called The E-Myth by Michael Gerber. The E-Myth stands for the entrepreneurial myth, and that's basically the myth that if you do a job right now, that you can leave that job and go out on your own and make the same or more amount of money doing that job on your own. That's the myth. The truth of the reality is that if, like let's say are a therapist or a lawyer or, someone like that, or a doctor even, the idea that you can go out on your own and start that business and make as much or more money than you're doing and working the same or fewer hours is ridiculous. You're probably going to be working a lot more hours, and you're probably going to be making less money when you're doing it on your own. And that's because you're not just doing your job. You're also going to be an administrator. You're going to be a marketer. You're going to be an HR person. You're going to have all these roles that you're going to have to tackle with your new business, and you just need to be aware of that. The fourth book, is a book that was actually referred to me a few years ago, and I love it. It's called The Simple Path to Wealth by J.L. Collins, and it basically talks about how to grow incredible wealth so that you can retire and enjoy and love your life. The last book I'll share with you, which I wish was available when I first started, because it would have done wonders for me. I've been using the system for years. I've talked about it many times as the Profit First system, or it's called Profit First by Mike Michalowicz. Great book. Talks about how to take the right amount of money out of your business, but not too much so that you're basically not making any money in your business, which is what happens to a lot of entrepreneurs when they get started, is they overspend and they don't have enough money left at the end of the month to pay their bills or pay themselves. Of course, mindset is only part of the equation. So these first 3 tips are really all about mindset and personal growth. And next, I want to go into some money tips. And so before I do that, I just want to recap. So with mindset and personal growth, the first 3 tips here, the only constant is change, learn to say no, and always keep learning. And if you do those things, you're going to be on the path to success. It's just going to take some time, but you can get there. This third category of tips that I want to share with you are all about money and finance. And most people, well, there are many reasons that people go into business for themselves. Some people crave lifestyle freedom. Others believe that starting their own business is the key to riches. Some people are just functionally unemployable and have no other choice. They can't get a job, but they need to work for themselves. Regardless of the reason you may be thinking about going into or starting a business, there's no denying that you need your business to provide you with some financial compensation, unless you're already financially independent and you're just looking for a fun hobby, which is fine too. But most people are looking for some sort of financial return on their investment when they start their own business. And not to mention, if you get the money stuff right at the very beginning, you're setting yourself up for success regardless of how well your business does or how much revenue you generate. Over your years of business, you're going to have many years where you're financially successful, but you're also going to have years where you may constantly feel like the walls are caving in on you financially and you just don't have enough to pay the bills. If you follow these important lessons, you're going to reach financial freedom eventually. It's just going to take some time. So the fourth tip I have for you today is, and it may be controversial to some of you, but save for retirement early and often. Now, some of you that are starting a business, you may think, well, I'm going to start this business and then in 5 or 10 years, I'm going to sell it for a huge payday. I don't need to save for retirement. I think that's a mistake. As a business owner, you don't have an employer that's setting up and contributing to a 401k for you. You are the one that's doing that, and you need to do it on your own. But the nice thing about running a small business is that there are several amazing retirement planning options available to you that most people that work at a normal job don't have access to. And you can contribute with a SEP IRA, for example. In 2025, you can contribute up to $70,000 to your retirement account and insulate that money from taxes. And my recommendation is that you contribute as much as you possibly can each year. Now, the way it works for the SEP IRA is you can contribute 25% of however much your income is. So, for example, if you pay yourself a salary of $50,000, then you can pay yourself, or you can contribute up to $12,500 to your SEP IRA that year. If you make as much as $280,000, then you can contribute the full $70,000 to your retirement. So that's how that works. So the more you make, the more you can contribute. It is capped at $70,000, and that's for 2025. Most people will neglect this advice, and I can tell you, you will probably regret it over time. I really would encourage you to max out your retirement contributions every year if possible. Even modest, consistent savings can turn into multiple 7 figures over time and set you up for true financial freedom. I was never consistent about this, at least when I started, which I now regret. But starting and funding a SEP IRA was one of the best decisions I ever made. I've also, if you have employees, you can look at simple IRAs. There's also there's self-employed 401ks. I'm not sure exactly what they're, solo 401ks, I think is what they're called. So there's a number of options that are available to you. And the IRAs, the SEP and the simple IRAs are going to be the least expensive and the easiest to manage. And you can set those up in just a few minutes. When you go to the 401k route, it's going to be a little bit more complicated. It's going to be more expensive, and there's going to be more paperwork and compliance involved. So the fifth tip I want to give you is to avoid debt and watch your business expenses like a hawk. So early on, I made the mistake of financing things from my law firm that I didn't really need. I spent thousands of dollars on a Yellow Page ad, if you remember those, good for you, that didn't turn into a single client for me. I spent hundreds of dollars on expensive letterhead that I thought would make me look more professional with my colleagues. Really wasn't necessary either. And I financed all of this on a credit card with the assumption that I would pay it off with a couple good clients. And it took me a little bit longer than that to do that. Debt is going to be a weight on your business, and unnecessary expenses are just as dangerous. So I want you to monitor your bank and your credit card statements vigilantly, keep your overhead lean, and when in doubt, ask yourself, when in doubt, ask yourself, is this an investment or is this just a shiny object that I'm interested in purchasing? If you spend less money on shiny objects, it's going to give you more freedom to invest in your retirement, as I just explained in tip number 4, and will allow you to weather the slow months when there isn't as much revenue coming in. So this goes along kind of nicely with tip number 6, which is to live beneath your means. So with tip number 5, we're really talking about business expenses. In tip number 6, I'm talking about personal expenses. You need to keep your personal expenses lean as well. Personally, as I mentioned before, I follow profit first, and I pull out a percentage of my revenue after I pay my staff each month as owner pay. So I also deposit 5 to 10% of my revenue each month into a profit account and another 10 to 15% into a tax account. This is kind of how the profit first system works. If I have a good month, that means that more of my revenue goes into savings and I can take more out for myself. And not only that, I also take 10% of the money that I pay myself and put it into a personal investment/savings account for myself. By doing this, I'm constantly adding to my nest egg in the event that something goes wrong in the business or I have a few lean months, which has happened over time. It's king when you're starting and building your own business. And if you have cash in the bank, it's going to allow you to say no to opportunities that don't match up with your values or your priorities, just like I talked about earlier on in tip number 2 when I talked about learning to say no. So tip number 7 is you don't need to make $1 million a year. This one, I'll be honest, took me a long time to learn. For many years, I felt like my success was tied to the revenue of my firm. And for some entrepreneurs, earning $1 million or more per year is the ultimate goal. But where I'm at in my life, I realize that you can have a very comfortable lifestyle business that supports you and your family without making 7 figures per year. And oftentimes, this type of business can be just as rewarding or even more so than running a huge enterprise with a lot of overhead and a lot of stress. This past summer, I got together with 3 of my closest friends. I already talked about this with my friend who has the lawnmower business. And like I said, we're all at various stages of our entrepreneurial journey, and we're all at least partial owners of our own businesses. And after we got back from a fun day out, we toured some wineries and went out to dinner. We're having some beers around the campfire and chatting about business that night. And one of my friends this is not the same friend as before, this is a different friend, was frustrated about a number of things related to his business and worried about how the current political climate with the current administration might impact him. Now, we all made some suggestions for how he could weather this storm and improve his business and his cash flow, but he kept coming back to the idea that he wanted to make more money. Now, he's a successful entrepreneur in his own right. He's already revealed to me his net worth and his financial goals. I know he's doing very well. So I asked him why he was working, what's the goal here? What is he looking for? And he had told me about how much money they had in the bank and how much money they had in retirement and their house is paid off and different things like that. And so if you look at this objectively, he had enough money saved to retire if he wanted to. I asked him why he was still working, and he just kept saying that he wants to make X amount of money per year and he wants to have X amount of money saved in the bank. But he didn't have a reason why. It just seemed like the right thing and like having more money would be better. That's basically the mindset he had. Now, I would challenge you to rethink your thoughts about money. If you're thinking, well, I just want to earn $1 million a year because that sounds like something I should do, that might not be the right reason to do that. Yes, having money is necessary to achieve financial freedom, but you don't need $100 million in the bank or even $10 million in the bank. You need to focus on what is important to you, figure out what that costs, and then plan your business around making enough money for you to enjoy your life and put enough money to save for retirement. Which leads us to tip number 8, and that is planning for early retirement. Now, you should be saving, I've already talked about this, and planning for retirement from the first day you start your business. I already mentioned setting up a SEP IRA, a simple IRA, something like that, and starting to contribute to it. But I just want to be clear here. When I talk about early retirement, and there's a lot that's been said about this in the FIRE community, which stands for Financial Independence, Retire Early. But by retirement, I don't necessarily mean that you have to stop working. In my version of retirement, I'm able to work as much or as little as I want. I have enough income from my investment portfolio to pay my living expenses. I can travel freely and time off when I want. without worrying about my business. This is something that I think that everybody should strive for. And if you are contributing to your retirement or your investment accounts on a monthly and yearly basis, on a quite regular basis, and you're living beneath your means, you're going to hit financial independence sooner than you realize. So those are the tips for money and personal finance. Let me just review them one more time. Save for retirement early and often, avoid debt, watch your business expenses, live beneath your means on a personal level, and think about why you're focusing on dollar goals. You don't need to make $1 million a year. And then finally, planning for early retirement. All right, so the next set of tips are really around clients and relationships. This is another subset that I think is very important. As a law firm owner, I have lots of clients, hundreds of clients. And my best clients come back to me for new projects and refer their friends and business colleagues to my firm time and time again. You must prioritize a culture of building strong interpersonal relationships with your clients and your staff and creating an amazing customer experience. Believe it or not, when you do this, it gives you a competitive advantage over your competitors. That doesn't make any sense. It does give you a competitive advantage in the marketplace, and your competitors, they may not be treating their clients so well. And maybe they're just relying on paid ads to get new business, and paid ads can go wrong. They can become more expensive. They can stop working. So you really want to nurture those relationships and build those relationships, which is why tip number 9 is to treat your clients like family. You're going to quickly learn in business that all your clients and customers are not the same. 20% of your clients are going to bring you 80% of your happiness in business and will make your work truly amazing. But the bottom 20% of your clients are going to cause 80% of your problems, refunds, and chargeback for your business. And hopefully those are minimal. I want you to do everything you can to treat your clients like family. You should be responsive to them. You should send little welcome gifts when you're hired for a large engagement or you finish a large engagement. You should be proactively reaching out and telling your clients what is going on with their case. Now, mind you, you may not be a lawyer, so maybe that's not a great example, but keep your clients posted on what's going on with the work you're doing for them is really a better way to say that. And use systems and checklists so that you don't forget to follow up. These small little gestures will go a long way towards generating additional referrals and repeat business alike from clients and customers that have learned to know, like, and trust you. Which leads us to tip number 10. And tip number 10 is to provide more value than you're paid. I've always made it a point to tell clients who are thinking about hiring me that I don't want their money if I can't provide them with at least as much value in return as the amount of money they're paying me. People pay you for the value you bring to their lives. And if you are a service provider, as I am, this is typically because you're providing them with a service that they don't or can't or won't do on their own. Or even if they could do it on their own, it would take them way longer and would be way harder to finish than if they hired you to help them. There are certain things that I personally can't or won't do, like cleaning out my gutters. Now, I've got a story that I don't know I've told this before, but one time about 7 or 8 years ago, I was trying to clean the leaves out of the gutters or clean the leaves off the roof of my house, which there were some gutters, but mostly I was trying to get leaves off the roof. And I used a ladder and I set it up next to the gutters and I climbed up on it. I ended up falling off the ladder, almost killing myself. I'm not really exaggerating, I don't think, because it was quite a long fall. I almost broke my arm, and that was not good. Another thing that I would not do, that I would hire somebody for, is wildlife removal or painting. Painting, I hate painting. So these are things that I just don't want to do, and I'd rather pay somebody to do them. There's lots of things in your life that you probably don't want to do that you're going to pay somebody to do. And there's lots of things that you might love doing that somebody else is happy to pay you to do for them. So if you love doing what you do and other people don't love doing that thing, then you're likely to have a very lucrative business and they're likely to pay you to do that for them. But the businesses that do the best deliver their results on time and professionally in a way that you can't wait to tell your friends how much you love the experience of working with that business. We've all experienced this, right? We've all shared businesses and gadgets and services that have just been amazing. On the other hand, there's also instances where I have friends that have cleaners, and every time the cleaners come, they tell me how horrible it is because the cleaners move things and, they clean the house, but they do it in a way that it doesn't make me want to work with that cleaning company. So you just got to be aware of that. When you give people, I should say, more than they expect or are looking for, they're going to become your biggest advocates. Which leads us to tip number 11. to hire help sooner than you think. Now, I've struggled with this over the years, and I've struggled with finding and hiring the right people for my law firm. I mentioned this at the outset, that I've hired a lot of people. I've let go of a lot of people. I've lost a lot of people. And I've gone through a number of different legal assistants over the years. And when you find a good one, you want to keep them, and your business is going to flourish as a result. You can't and shouldn't do all this stuff yourself. Remember, you only need to pay whoever you're hiring for the first month. That's all the money you need to have in the bank. You don't need enough to pay them for the next year. But the right employee is worth their weight in gold and will end up generating an ROI for you and for your business. I've had great employees. I've had horrible ones. But one of the best lessons I've learned is to hire sooner than you feel comfortable, because you're going to need that help. The right hire is going to free you up to focus on doing more marketing and building better products and services for your clients or customers. So those are the next set of tips from the clients and relationships category. We've got treat your clients like family, provide more value than you're paid for, and hire help sooner than you think. So that's going to wrap up. I think I'm going to turn this into a two-part series. And that wraps up part one of the 20 lessons I've learned over 20 years in business. We covered some mindset issues, money, and client relationships. And I hope these takeaways save you some time, save you some stress, and maybe even save you some dollars or allow you to make some more money. In the next episode, we're going to dig into the other half of this list, which talks about marketing, growth, and business operations, all the nuts and bolts that keep your business running and thriving over the long haul. So make sure you hit subscribe so you don't miss it. Thanks again for listening to the Legal Gym podcast, and I will see you in part 2 next week. Thanks, folks.